It repeats the same thing. So let's pick up with Kuf Yodal. Mida Kineged Mida. So let's remember again, the topic we're discussing over here is the Mechaber is highlighting the Yesod that when I suffer adversity or difficulty in life, it's important to try to understand the deeper message in the adversity and the difficulty. Meaning that when things happen to me in life, even though, of course, I don't know why things happen, or if something is an onesh or something is a source, I don't know, but it's my job to try to figure out. It's my job to try to figure out what the deeper message is, and it's my job to try to figure out ultimately what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to teach me. So the Mechaber is coming along over here and trying to teach us that when we suffer difficulty or adversity, even though I don't know the will of God, but to try to intuit, to try to understand what message is HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaching me. So Mida Kineged Mida, Kuf Yodalad, Bishul Sheyeda Ha'adam, Lefarish Es Ramazav Shalaborim, Ulahavin Al Eza Avan Ba'olah Yisur, Tzarech Uladas, in order for a person to be able to go ahead and to ultimately understand why he's suffering his adversity, why he's dealing with his difficulties, so a person has to realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, what we call Mida Kineged Mida, with reciprocity, tit for tat. The idea is, well, we'll see. Da'inu, shayisurim mechuvanim ba'ofen kazeh, shalafiyam yuchala adam ladas b'ma pagam. They're both saying, just to understand this. When the Ribono Shel Olam gives me life circumstances, those life circumstances often are Mida Kineged Mida, meaning that the Ribono Shel Olam, so let me take a step back in a different way. You know, in Yiddishkeit, so punishment, Yisurim, is always rehabilitative and never simply punitive. What's the proof to that? The proof to that, you know, that in the, we'll call it the Judaic penal system, there's no such thing as jail. No such thing as jail. In fact, again, when you look throughout the Torah Kedosha, the only time jail is ever mentioned is when something happens, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't know what to do. So the pasuk says, "Vayanichul b'mishmar," like by the makoshesh. Mishmar kilo prash mayaselo. They put the makoshesh, the guy who was Machal Shabbos, they put him in a holding cell because they did not know what to do with him. So why doesn't Yiddishkeit believe in jail? Because Ribono Shel Olam knew something that we're only discovering as a society now, which is if you put someone in a cage for a number of years, they're not getting any better, right? Meaning they actually, in fact, they only get worse. You only turn them more animalistic by ultimately caging. So punishment has to be rehabilitative, which, by the way, is a very important episode also in parenting. In parenting, sometimes we have to give certain punishments to our children. It's always good that you try to figure out what do I want my kid to learn from the punishment? How do I want them to grow? Not just to get the patch, but to understand how could they evolve as a human being as a result, ultimately, again, of these realities. So the idea that the Mechaber is saying over here is therefore when HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes ahead and visits certain Yisurim upon me, difficulties, challenges, those are there for rehabilitative purposes. Those are there for me to learn something. And again, so says the Mechaber, if I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, Mida Kineged Mida, that means that somehow the adversity that I experience is there in order to go ahead and highlight some area in which I am deficient. L'mashal, he says, in Pagam b'mitzvah tliya b'yad smol k'gon tefillin, as I nifkas b'yado ha'smolis k'dome. Before we get into his examples, I do want to point out that some of the examples that he's going to give are very we'll call them very much in a vacuum. Meaning, I will say, we know that sometimes in life we learn certain things on a theoretical level, but at the end of the day, the application becomes a bit more complicated. So what we're going to learn on the theoretical level is that every single time I suffer adversity, that somehow, somewhere, there's a Mida Kineged Mida, and that there's something for me to be learned. But at the other time, again, I always come back because I always have a difficulty personally with some of the things that are said in the Sefer. In that, there's also tzaddik v'ralo, meaning not every single form of suffering is because I've done something wrong. Sometimes bad things happen to good people for cheshbonos that we don't understand. But if I'm the person undergoing the adversity, My job is to try to figure out what should I learn from it. That's what you have to take from this. So when I suffer adversity or setback, and I both say, you understand, when we speak about difficulty or adversity or setback, so you understand, of course, it doesn't have to be major life things. It's saying all of us suffer adversity and setbacks each and every day, sometimes in big ways, sometimes in small ways. My job is to figure out what's the midah keneged midah. What is it? What part of my life could be deficient that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to send me a message? Look at the next section. Dugmos me'atova. So we'll say he gives examples over here of the midah keneged midah relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'chein amru Chazal b'midah she'adam moded ba modedin lo. What says the Mishnah says, literally the measure through which one measures, with that he is measured. Shimshon halach achar einov lefichach nikru plishtim es einov. So Shimshon, we know again, Shimshon was pulled after his eyes. In other words, Shimshon ultimately again falls in love with someone who he should not have. Shimshon ultimately is pulled after the lust. So therefore, again, the Plishtim gouged his eyes. Avshalom nisga'a b'saro. Avshalom became an exceptional Bal Gaiva with his hair. I'm not one of my nisyonos, but Avshalom went ahead and became a Bal Gaiva with his hair. Lefichach nitla b'saro. Therefore, again, when Avshalom launches his rebellion and the rebellion is crushed and he runs away, he's running away on his mule, the Navi says, and what happens? His hair got stuck in the tree, in the branch, and his donkey, his mule kept on riding, and he was like dangling there, and that's how they killed him, that's how they caught him. Miriam, on the flip side, we'll say, lest you think this is only negative. Miriam, himtina Moshe sha'achas. Miriam waited for Moshe Rabbeinu for 1 hour. This refers to when little baby Moshe was placed in the basket on the Nile River. Everyone else left, but Miriam waited for him. Therefore, Therefore, again, Klal Yisrael waited for Miriam when she was stricken with saras. So therefore, Klal Yisrael waited for Miriam for 7 days. So the point I will say is, you see this yesod of this midah kineged midah, that the Ribbon Shalom acts towards us with an incredible degree of reciprocity. Va'od muva. So also, the Gemara gives other examples. Skip down a little bit to the last paragraph of Kuf Yodalet. This is amazing. Va'od b'Gemara. Let's say this is wild. Listen to this, Maisa. Sheikh Mitzolo Arba Meos Chavios Yain. So we'll say Rafuna once had 400 barrels of wine, which went sour. Bo'u Rabbana Levakra. So we'll say, listen to this, Maisa. So the rabbis came to visit him. Va'amrulo. They now we'll say, you have to understand, losing 400 barrels is huge. It's huge. So when it says the rabbis came to visit him, what does it mean they came to visit him? What does it mean? So understand, it's like a pashut, it's like business nichum avelim. Like that's what this was. He lost an incredible fortune. So the rabbis came to visit him. Va'amrulo alecha lefashesh b'maasecha ulechapes esa avon shebiglolo hakadosh baruch hu hechmitz es yenecha. So you have to be very careful before you ever say these words to someone else. But the rabbis came along and they said to Rav Huna, listen, you really need to do a cheshbon nefesh. How did this happen to you? In other words, what did you do wrong that brought this misfortune upon you? What did you do wrong? Ultimately, again, that went ahead and caused you to suffer this incredible loss. Amar lahem, v'chi chashad ani beinechem. So Huna says, well, I don't understand. Are you choshed? Did I do something? How do I do something wrong? Or why do you assume that because I suffered this misfortune, I did something wrong? Anulo, v'chi chashad HaKadosh Baruch Hu shemanish lelo siba. Exchange. So they said, well, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu suspect in your eyes that he would do something without a particular reason? Amar lahem, mishashama alai shenichshalti be'ezechit sheyomar. So Huna said, fine. And also, it's a very brave statement to make. So Huna said, if someone heard that I was nichshalt in some aveira, then tell me. In other words, if someone heard about me that I did something, I can't think of anything. Also, can you imagine being on that level? By the way, can you imagine being on that level of not being able to think of anything wrong you did offhand? I can think I didn't do anything wrong in the last 4 minutes because I've been sitting here. Right? But imagine that. So if Huna says, listen, I don't know. I tried to do the cheshbon nefesh. I can't think of anything wrong that I did. But if anyone else knows of something wrong that I did, please come forward. Amrulo. So the Rabbanim said, okay, it's funny you ask. So Shamanu, top of page Kuf Tezvav, Shamanu, Shekevodo lo nosein lo oris, Pol shenoto scharo ba'achuz mimashim otzi asada. Eschelko b'zmuras hagefen. Both sides. Do you remember again? We actually just had this in Bava Basra. So part of the halach is if you have if you have a sharecropper, not only does the farmer get to share in the actual produce, but with vines. Remember again, vines are often pruned. So the sharecropper gets some of those vines as well each and every year. So what happens? So currently did not give the sharecropper his share of the vines. Amar lahem harehu gonev lias hakol. So Rav Huna said that sharecropper, he robs me blind. He robs me blind all of the time. Lefachos bizmuros hagefen ani mar shela atzmi lo lehis chalekito. You know what? The guy robs me blind. I turn a blind eye to it, right? I don't look, but at least I'm not going to give him the vines. Meaning, at the end of the day, I feel like I have the right. Amrulo zemasha omrim ha'am hagonev mehaganev afhu toim tam geneva. This is what people say, that when you steal from a thief, you're also a shtickle thief. In other words, that even though you could justify that act of taking back from someone who constantly exploits you and takes from you, but at the end of the day, you're a ganav. At the end of the day, if you steal from a thief, you're also trying tam geneva. Amar lahem mekabel ani alatzmi loshuv b'tshuva v'loses lo eschelko b'zmuros hagafen. So ultimately, again, he says, Rav Huna said, fine, I will go ahead and mekabel upon myself to go ahead and do tshuva and to give the sharecropper back his portion of the vines. Second paragraph, Miharega Shekiba Rav Huna alat lotak masav. From the moment that Rav Huna took upon himself to go ahead and fix his deeds, Afa Pisha Adayin Lotike Masav Bepoel Bekoach HaKabbalah Bilbat Shai Samidis VaKadosh Baruch Hu Yoda Shebevadai Hu Yikayim HaShekiba Lalav Nepach HaChomitz VeChazar Liyos Yayin. I will say in that moment where Rav Huna made his Kabbalah, in that moment where Rav Huna went ahead and was makabel upon himself to go ahead and change his ways and not go ahead and take from the sharecropper, in that moment, miraculously, the vinegar turned back to wine. Others say that not only did it turn back to wine, others say it remained as vinegar, but the price of vinegar went up even above wine. We'll say the point of the Maisa, besides being a very dramatic Maisa, the point of the Maisa is Amida Kineged, that when we suffer adversity or we suffer setbacks in life, even though I don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu does things, but I have to try to figure out what the embedded message is. What is it perhaps? What area perhaps am I deficient in? Where is my weakness? What is HaKadosh Baruch Hu trying to teach me? And ultimately, again, how can I correct it? All right, we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Emir Tashem in the middle of Kuf Tesvav, Emir Tashem tomorrow morning. All right, to both sides, we're going to begin Maseches Sanhedrin. Sorry? We should really reconfigure the weight. Oh, yeah. Oh, you said it? All right, Matt, let's go. Do it right now. 60. Right around 60. Sorry. I got right around 60. I'm not going to remember it. Somebody's going to go into stuff. All right, Javosai, good morning. Good morning. Let's begin. So first of all, welcome to all the new faces from Masechah Sanhedrin. Welcome to Baruch Hashem, those who started Baba Basra with us, took a shtickle sabbatical, and are now back again. Baruch Hashem for Sanhedrin. And of course, a welcome to all of just everyone who was here yesterday morning as well. It's so beautiful to begin Sanhedrin with such a robust Olam Halavai. We should be Zoch and Meretz Hashem. I don't know where we're going, but at least for now, but we should be Zoch and Meretz Hashem to outgrow this space. And I will say, I just want to, just one word of Hakdama. New things are always exciting. That new Masech, the smell, that days of anything is always exciting. And I will say the goal is the same excitement and the same energy you feel right now, it and keep it with you every single day, because every daf, every morning is a brand new haschava. Every morning is a brand new beginning. Every morning is mamish, not just a new chapter, but a new book. So the same energy we feel today, when you begin a new Masechta, you feel like you have a new lease on life. So that same energy and that same excitement that we feel now, in Meretz Hashem, we should be zocha to take with us each and every day throughout Masechah Sanhedrin and all of our following Masechtos as well. Yeshua to all of you who are Moser Nefesh to be here this morning. Halavai, it's a great success to be able to learn together. Our shir this morning is dedicated by Shmuel and Devorah Miller, who are on their way moving to Los Angeles now, with deep appreciation to the Chevrei Adaf, whom I merited to begin with and be immersed in and complete Masechtos. Berov Hakaras Hatov Shmuel Miller, and of course again the Masechta is also dedicated to the Ilui Nishmas Eliezer ben Kolonamos. And with that, we begin on Daf Beis Amud Aleph. So Masechta Sanhedrin begins with a massive Mishnah, which spans the entirety of Beis Amud Aleph and goes on to Gimel as well. So we're going to go through it now. Dinei Mamanis. We'll say the Masechta begins with an in-depth discussion about what type of judicial bodies are able to adjudicate which type of law. So we will discuss that there are different types of Batei Din. There's a 3-person Beis Din under certain circumstances. There's a 5-person Beis Din. There's a 23-member Beis Din that we call a Sanhedrin HaKatan. And there is a 71-member Beis Din. 70 or 71 we'll discuss. That's called a Beis Din HaGadol. There is only one 71 body of Sanhedrin HaGadol. Every city will see, or the major cities had smaller what we call Sanhedrin HaKatans, 23-member Batei Din, and of course 3-member Batei Din were often found in multiple locations. So anyway, with that we begin the Mishnah. Dinei Mamanis B'Shlosha. We'll say, again, monetary law is judged with 3 judges. Gzelos v'chavalos b'Shlosha. So we'll say similarly again, Gzelos v'chavalos means cases of theft. Chavalos will say personal injury. So we'll discuss why the Mishnah separates out these two, meaning Dinei Mamanis and then Gzelos and Chavalos. B'Shlosha nezek v'chatzi nezek. So we'll say nezek. Remember again, nezek shalim, full damages. Chatzi nezek, half damages. Remember from Baba Kama days, nezek is paid by a short time, by a first-time offending shor. So in these cases, Tashlume Kefel, we'll say Kefel is a situation ultimately again where double payment, Tashlume Arba Vechamisha, 4 and 5 times penalty payments, which we'll say is a situation if a person goes ahead and steals and slaughters a cow or a sheep. So the Gemara says Bishlosha. All of these cases are adjudicated by a Beis Din of 3 people. Ha'onis v'hamefata. So we'll say onis is a man who violates a woman. Mefat is a man who seduces a woman. Va'motzi shemra, or one who goes ahead and is motzi shemra. So we'll say the case of motzi shemra, and again, as in every Mishnah, we're only going through the superficial view of these statements. The Gemara is obviously going to go in depth in each of these cases. Motzi shemra, we'll say, is the man who gets married and makes an accusation that his wife was not a besula at the time of their marriage. So B'Shlosh Tadei Rabbi Meir says, these cases are adjudicated with a Beis Din of 3 people. The Chachamim say, Motzi Shemra be'esrim u'shlosha. Chacham say no. Motzi Shemer is actually adjudicated. What we call the Sanhedrin HaKatan. By the way, just Sanhedrin HaKatan. You know, if you ever go to the kever of Shimon HaTzadik in East Yerushalayim, right by Shimon HaTzadik's kever, they have this kever called the kever of the Sanhedrin HaKatan. Why do they call it the kever of the Sanhedrin HaKatan? Because they found 23 burial spots in this particular cave, like the minion. I don't know if it was actually a Sanhedrin HaKatan, but they called it in any event. So the Chacham say, Moti Shemra be'esrim u'shlosha. Chacham say no, that Moti Shemra has to be adjudicated with a basin of 23 people. Why? Because they're both saying there's a possible din of dinei nefashos. Now, how is that? If you look at Rashi, and by the way, we have to give a big shalom aleichem to Rashi, right? We haven't had Rashi in a long time. Now, again, the Rashbam, who is Rashi's Einakol, is Rashi's grandson, was a wonderful, wonderful companion to Asur Basra. But it's nothing like having the Zayda back. So Rashi is back. So both say it's the short lines, about 6 lines in Dinei Nefashos. So Rabbi Meir says, so the Chacham say that Motzi Shemra has to be adjudicated with 23 dayanim. Why? Dinei Nefashos. Dim emes hayashazin satachtov hi beskila. Because I will say, remember again, Motzi Shemra is a man claiming that his wife wasn't a basula. Now we have to go ahead and vet that claim. One of the possibilities is that he was right; she wasn't a basula. And in fact, she had relations with a man after Kiddushin. But if a woman has relations with someone other than her husband after Kiddushin, that's znus, right? That's znus, that's adultery, and that's punishable by skila. So the Chachamim say that since Motzi Shemra has a potential misa ramification, there's a potential death penalty there, therefore Allah Chalamayis has to be adjudicated by a basin of 23, which are both like, you already begin to see the principles evolving. You begin to see over here this yisod that a basin of 3 could adjudicate monetary matters. Basin of 23 apparently can adjudicate dinei nefashos. He goes on. The Gemara goes weiter. Makos b'shlosha. So we'll say makos, right? Malchus. So lashes. And lashes we'll discuss again under what circumstances can be levied by a basin of 3. And Rabbi Shmuel says, no, you need a basin of 23 to be able to give malchus. Iber HaChodesh. So we'll see Iber HaChodesh means every month could either have 29 or 30 days. So the Maisa, again, in terms of determining that, so that could be done by a basin of 3. Iber HaShana, so we'll see Iber HaShana, one of the interesting parts that we have in the Jewish calendar is the following. We have a solar calendar, we have a lunar calendar. The issue that sometimes comes up is the Yom Tovim are linked to the seasons which are solar based. So, for example, the Torah calls Pesach the Chag HaAviv, the spring festival, the spring Yom Tov. So here's the problem: is that what happens when sometimes Pesach is going to come out in the middle of winter. I will say this, understand these seasons don't go by Chutz La'aretz; these seasons go by Eretz Yisrael. So when Chazal saw fall out in the winter, they'd make an Iber yard. They would go ahead and they would add an additional month. So who decides that? So the Gemara says, Iber Hashana b'shlosha, the Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, b'shlosha maschilin, u'b'chamisha nosin v'nosnin, v'gomrim b'shiva. So we'll say, amazingly enough, Rabbi Meir says that an Iber Shana could go ahead and be and could be established by 3. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, we begin the discussion with 3, we then continue the discussion with 5, and we decide it with 7. But if you went ahead and they decided that the year is a leap year, even with 3 dayanim, ultimately, again, the leap year is established. I will say first white line in the Mishnah on Beis Yud Aleph. Smichas zekenim. So we'll say smichas zekenim. Now here, if you look Rashi again, so Rashi is about probably about 10, 12 lines down in the short line. Smichas zekenim. Arosh par ha'elam davar shel tzibur. So we'll say we'll discuss this halacha, which is a fascinating case. Par ha'elam davar min hatzibur means situations where Beis Din makes an erroneous ruling, and as a result, Klal Yisrael commits some type of significant aver. So there's a special carbon that's brought as a result of that. The Zekanim, the elders, the Sanhedrin, have to do smicha, have to do the leaning on that animal. Va'arifas egla. What arifas egla means the paraduma. The paraduma. I'm sorry. The egla arufa. Segla arufa. Remember again, you find the corpse. This is also amazing because you see. By the way, if this doesn't get you excited for a Sanhedrin, you see all of these different concepts. Every single one of these things is going to be something we're going to explore in the Masech. That's incredible. Arifa segla egla arufa. You find a person who has been murdered in between 2 cities. We measure the closest city. The elders of that city come out, decapitate the calf, wash their hands over it. We'll discuss that process. B'shlosha. Rabbi Shimon says these processes can be taken care of with a basin of 3. Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'chamisha. Rabbi Yehuda says no. For these things you require a basin of 5. Ha-chalitza v'hamiyun b'shlosha. So we'll say chalitza, which again, in a situation where a man dies without children, leaves behind mitzvah for the surviving brother to marry the widow. In the event that the brother doesn't want to marry, the wife doesn't want to marry, they do the process of chalitza. Miyun. I will say, so what's miyun? Midoraisa, father has the right to marry off his minor daughter. His minor daughter. That affects biblical kiddush. What happens if there's no father? Chazal gave the mother or the brother the right to marry off the girl for her to protect her own interests, but it is only a rabbinic marriage. Because it is only a rabbinic marriage, it could be dissolved with her simple refusal. Miyun means her refusal. So, but this is done in front of a beis din, so it requires a beis din. Both chalitza and miyun require a beis din of 3. Nata revai u'maiser sheni. So also listen to this. So nata revai ultimately again refers to the year produce. Now, both say we will discuss this in depth. For the first 3 years, produce is considered to be arla. 4th year, it's yours, you could eat it, but effectively it becomes like Meiser Sheni. What does that mean? The same way that if I have Meiser Sheni, I have an obligation to bring it up to Yerushalayim and to eat it. So to again, not the Ravai, it's yours, but you have to eat it in Yerushalayim. Or so not the Ravai or Meiser Sheni. And both say Meiser Sheni means it's a tithe. I, the owner, get to keep it and eat it, but I have to bring it to Yerushalayim. She'im damav, you do it. And both say these are cases where Lamaisa, again, I don't know the value of these items, and I want to go ahead and redeem them. Bishlosha. So we'll say this type of redemption is done in front of a beis din of 3. So we'll discuss why you need a beis din for things like this. Look at the Gemara. Hakdeshos bishlosha. We'll say similarly again. If you look at Rashi, hakdeshos habalif dosan sarach shlosha l'shuman. We'll say if you go ahead and you have something that is consecrated, and you want to redeem it, you have to redeem it in front of a beis din of 3. In other words, you need a beis din of 3 to evaluate the hektish. Erchin hamataltalim b'shlosha. We'll say similarly again, if you have erchin hamataltalim, so we'll discuss what this means. Erchin usually means something that has become kaddish as a result of an erech vow. Erech vow usually is where you pledge the value of something, whether it's yourself, whether it's of an object. So we'll discuss what this phrase erchin metaltalim means, but it requires a beis din of 3. Rabbi Yehuda Omer echad mehen kohen. Rabbi Yehuda says it requires a beis din of 3, and one of the 3 must be a kohen. V'karkos tisha the kohen. We'll say similarly karka. So if you have karka that belongs to hektish, if you have karka that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, and you want to redeem it, you require a beis din of 10 altogether, one of whom must be a kohen. V'adam ki yotzei bahem. Rashi points out v'adam. He says over here, haba liftos atzmo miad hegdish sarach asar l'shuma. So we'll say now again. It sounds like a strange case. The Gemara is going to explain it. But if a person is kadosh and he wants to redeem himself, he also requires this same group of 10, one of whom is a kohen, to go ahead and we'll discuss what exactly is the case of a person who is kadosh. So the Gemara goes weiter. So dinei nefashos ve'esrim l'shlosha. We'll say dinei nefashos means any case ultimately again where there's a capital crime. So any case where again somebody's being sentenced to death. Ultimately, again, the death sentence can only be leveled upon someone with 23 dayanim. Harova v'hanirva. So we'll say rova and nirva are cases of bestiality, either where the animal violates a woman or the animal is violated by a man. In these cases, I will say esrim shlosha. These cases, so the person who engages in the act of bestiality is put to death. The animal is also killed. So any case where there's a capital offense requires a beis din of 23. So we'll say any case where there is a death sentence requires a beis din of at least 23 people. Shahanisko be'esrim ushlosha. So we'll say a case of a shahanisko. Shahanisko, Rashi says over here, shenagach adam umeis. We'll say this is a case of where an ox gored a person and the person died. So the halacha is this also requires a beis din of 23 people. Shnei amar hashar yisak gam ba'alav you must. The shor shall be stoned. also its owner shall be put to death. Kimisas bailin, kach misas hashar. In the same way that the owner could only be put to death with a basin of 23, so to the shar could only be put to death with a basin of 23. Now, both I want to point out, we know this halacha because we learned this in Baba Kama. We don't actually execute the owner of the ox for this particular offense, meaning if my ox chas v'shalom kills someone, I am not chayev misa for that, I'm chayev mamon for that. So we'll discuss that verbiage of the Mishnah and the Gemara. Haze'ev v'ha'ari v'ha'dov v'ha'namar v'ha'bardulis v'ha'nachash. So we'll say again, another somewhat strange case, which we're not exactly sure, but a ze'ev is a wolf, ari is a lion, dov is a bear, namar is a leopard, bardulus, we'll discuss it's a machlokas, exactly how to define it. Nachash is a snake. All of these cases are both sides, where if you look at Rashi, it's the second wide line in Rashi. Haze'evari, shemisu adam v'nidonin b'skila kishar. So we'll say all of these cases is where one of these animals went ahead and killed a person. So the halacha is misasan be'esrin mushlosha. They're put to death of 23. Again, we'll discuss the specifics of this case in the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, kala koldem lahargan zacha. Rabbi Eliezer says, if you see one of these animals that kills people, you do not have to wait for a basin of 23, but rather kala kodem zachaba. If you see it, kill it. Rabbi Akiva Omer, misasan be'esrin, says no, their death penalty is carried out with a basin of 23. So we'll say what exactly Rabbi Akiva is being mosif on the first opinion. We'll see in the Gemara. Ain't done in loas hashevet veloas hanavish veloas navi sheker velo kohen gadol ela al pi bezdin shel shim v'echad. So we'll say now what you've seen over here. We started with batei din of 3. We went to batei din of 5 under certain circumstances 7, and then we went to batei din of 23. Now going up the level, the Gemara says we do not go ahead and judge a shevet. Now, both say, now when would you be judging a shevet? Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. It's the third wide line in Rashi. Ve'in danin loas hashevet. Rubo shel shevet she'avdu avodah zara b'mezid. So we'll say this is about a case where the majority of one particular tribe, one particular shevet, intentionally worshipped avodah zara. Below es navi sheker. So we'll say navi sheker is to go ahead and convince Klal Yisrael to worship avodah zara. Below es kohen gadol. We'll discuss exactly what the case of kohen gadol is over here. Ela al pi beis din shel shivim ve'echad. We'll say all of these individuals, all of these cases could only be tried by a beis din of 71. Similarly, we cannot go out for a melchemes harishus. Right? We'll say now we're going to get into this fascinating discussion. It's called a melchemes mitzvah and a melchemes rishus, an obligatory war versus an optional war. So Rashi actually already comments over here. Rashi says the melchemes harishus. He says kol milchama kari rishus levad melchemes Yoshua she'ezolich bo she'eretz Yisrael. So Rashi says every war, pretty much from this point forward, is always considered to be an optional war, because the only melchemes mitzvah Rashi posits was when Yoshua conquered Eretz Yisrael. That was a melchemes mitzvah. Anything else is a melchemes rishus. But again, we're gonna define that a little bit differently as we go on. Ve'ein mosifin ala ir va'ala zaros ela al pi beis shel shim ve'echad. It's another interesting case. Let's say you want to expand the area of Yerushalayim, or you want to expand the area of Harabayis, you can only do so with a beis din of 71. I will say, you should understand this statement. We spoke about this a little bit on Shavuos. There's a whole discussion about whether or not one is permitted to go up to Harabayis today. So one of the compelling reasons why it is permitted to go, at least on the outskirts of Harabayis, is because, again, that platform that extended area was created by Herod. It was never vested with Kedushas Harabayis. Why? Because of this Mishnah. Because in order for an area to have Kedushas Harabayis, in order for that extension, it has to be done by the Sanhedrin of 71. It wasn't done by the Sanhedrin of 71. How do we know that? We learned this. How do we know it? Because Herod killed the Sanhedrin of 71. In fact, one of his first orders of business was a shtickle paranoid. He was a little bit paranoid. He killed out virtually the entire Sanhedrin. So there was no Sanhedrin to Mekadosh. Again, we'll go into each of these ideas. The Gemara goes weiter. So we'll say we will discuss that they used to make Sanhedrios. Sanhedrios, so we'll say, if you look at Rashi, it's in the fourth wide line towards the bottom. Sanhedrios, Shayimov Shivan, Sanhedri, Kitana, Shal Kav Gimel B'chol, Ir V'ir. Kedichsev Titim B'chol B'chol Sharecha, Utzrichin Beizin HaGadosh, Shabalishkash HaGazis, L'atzeis Ulo Shiva. So listen to this, Rabbi. They used to go ahead and establish smaller Batei Din, which we call the Sanhedrin HaKatan, 23 judge courts in different large cities. Those smaller 23 judge courts could only be established by the Sanhedrin HaGadol. So the High Court would have to leave Lishkas HaGazis, that we'll discuss, the Chamber of Hewn Stone in the Beis HaMikdash. They would go out like a site visit. They'd go out to go ahead and see this community and decide whether or not it was appropriate to establish a Sanhedrin HaKatan in this particular city. So the Gemara goes like that. Ein osin ir nidachas. Osin ir nidachas elal pi beizin shel shivim ve'echad. Similarly, Rabbi Osai, you can't condemn a city as the ir nidachas without the ruling of the Sanhedrin HaGadol, 71-person Sanhedrin. We'll say ir nidachas is a city whom the majority of the members of the city have gone ahead and worshipped Avodah Zarah. That city is condemned to be wiped out. That type of ruling can only be made by the Sanhedrin HaGadol. So the Gemara goes like, "Ein osin ir nidachas v'safar." Furthermore, again, you can't make a border city into an ir nidachas. Again, we'll discuss why that is in the Gemara. The Mishnah goes on, "V'lo shalosh aval osin achos v'shtayim." That's another interesting statement. Furthermore, you can't make 3 cities into an ir nidachos, but rather at most 1 and maybe 2. We'll discuss what that means. Sanhedrin Gedola, Haisa Shal Shim Ve'echad. So we'll say now it's interesting. After we give all of the different cases adjudicated by the different types of Batei Din, now the Mishnah actually gives the definitions. So Sanhedrin Gadol, the large Sanhedrin of Osai, was made up of 71 judges. Ukitana Shal Esrim Shlosha was made up of 23 judges. How do you know that a large Sanhedrin was made up of 71 judges? Listen to this. Shneimar Asfali Shivim Ish Miziknei Yisrael. Umosha al Gabein. Because remember, when Moshe Rabbeinu reaches out to Kadosh Baruch Hu for help, so what does Kadosh Baruch Hu tell him? Isfali, right? Gather for me 70 elders. So there are 70 people plus Moshe Rabbeinu. That gives us the number 71 for the Sanhedrin HaGadol. Rabbi Huda Omer Shivim. Rabbi Huda Omer Shivim. We'll discuss this machlokes. So the first opinion, the Gemara says that the Sanhedrin HaGadol is 71. Rabbi Huda, we will say, says no, the Sanhedrin HaGadol is 70. Rabbi say this poses an obvious problem. Why would anyone ultimately say that the Sanhedrin is an even-numbered judicial body? But we'll see that in the Gemara. We'll say this is riveting. How do you know that a small Sanhedrin was made up of 23 judges? Watch this. Shneimar v'shaftu ha'eda v'tzilu ha'eda. So we'll say because the pasuk says literally the Eda, which means the congregation or the body will judge, and the congregation, the body, will save. So we'll say this is a reference ultimately again to the Sanhedrin HaKatan. So watch this. Eda shofetes ve'eda matzeles. So we'll say that teaches you that has to be comprised of 2 bodies. One body that is capable ultimately again of judging, which usually the Mishnah's understanding over here in a guilty sense, and one that is capable of saving, meaning in an exonerating sense. Eida shofetes ve'eda matzila, harikan esrim, that gives you 20. Now we'll say, the Mishnah is saying, the word Eida, by definition, always represents a group of 10. So asks the Gemara. So therefore, if you have an v'shaftua Eida ve'tzilua Eida, 2 different Eidas, 10 plus 10 is 20. Uminay le'eda shi'asara. So how do you know ultimately again that an Eida is a group of 10 people? Shneimar Admasai le'eda hara hazos. Because the pasuk by the Meraglim says, how long should I put up with this evil Eida? That's reference to the Meraglim. Now, Yotzu Yoshua v'Kalev. The Moshe said there are 12 Meraglim, minus Yoshua and Kalev. Who does the Eid? So the Eida you see from here refers to what? Refers ultimately again to 10. So therefore, again, if in a Sanhedrin HaKatan you have the Shaftua Eida ve'tzilua Eida, that's 20. That's 20. Shomea ani. So that only gives me 20. How do I know that it's 23? Because again, mimashna shene'emar lo siya achri rabim l'raos. Supposed to listen to this. The pasuk says, "You shall not follow the majority for negative things." Now we're going to discuss what this means in a judicial sense. Shomea ani she'eya imam l'tova. But it tells you that I should be with the majority for positive things. So we'll say the way the Mishnah understands this is the following: that when it comes to a Beis Din finding someone guilty, we will never follow a simple majority. Simple majority means one more. But however, again, when it comes to finding someone innocent, we will follow a simple majority. So Gemara says, if that's the case again, then why does the pasuk also say that you should tilt yourself towards the rabbim? Lo kat yascha l'tova, hat yascha l'ra'ah. The tilting towards exoneration should not be the same as tilting towards finding the individual guilty. How so? Both say, watch this. Hat yascha l'tova al pi eid echad. Because ultimately, again, when you go ahead and you lean towards the majority for something good, all you need is the simple majority of one. Hat yascha l'ra'ah al pi shnai. But I will say again, when a Beis Din finds someone guilty, there must be a majority of at least two. The ain Beis Din shackle. So we'll say, now I know Ada teaches me I have at least 20. I also know that in order to find someone guilty, I need at least a majority of 2. That gives me at least a Beis Din of 22. The ain Beis Din shackle. You can't have an even numbered Beis Din. Mosifin alein od echad. Therefore, we add one more judge. Harekan esim ushlosha. That gives us, Rabbosai, the complete number of 23 for the Sanhedrin HaKatan. Again, we'll get into this more in the Gemara. The Kamiyeh Ba'ir, the Tehirui L'Sanshel. This is an interesting question. This is like city planning questions. How big does a city have to be in order to get its own Sanhedrin HaKatan? I guess this is now you've made it, I guess, if you have like a pizza store. So, this is like, if you have a Sanhedrin HaKatan. So how large does a city have to be in order to have a Sanhedrin HaKatan? So the Gemara says 120 people, which we'll say. So we'll discuss now that doesn't seem like a very large number of people. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yechemia Omer Masayim Ushloshim. Rabbi Nehemiah says, no, it's 230 people, Keneged Sare Asaros. Because it will say, ultimately, again, if you're going to bring in a Sanhedrin HaKatan of 23 judges, each of those judges at least has to be, quote, over 10 people. So if the city population is less than 230, we're not bringing in a Sanhedrin HaKatan. Fine. So let's go like that. I'm going to share with you a beautiful idea, but first we'll get to the end of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Atu gzelos v'chavalos, lav dinei mamanas nenu. So we'll say the Gemara asked an interesting question. If you remember again, the way that the Mishnah broke up the cases was the following. The Mishnah began by telling me, Dine Mamanis, monetary law, Bishlosha. The Beis Din of 3 people, Gzelos v'chavalos Bishlosha. And similarly, again, cases of theft and injury. Chavalos means like to injure someone, personal injury. And also, but Beis Din of 3 people. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Why do you break off gezelos vechavalos from dinei mamnis? Right? Again, the rulings regarding theft and injuries are part of dinei mamnis. It's part of monetary law. So why do you say dinei mamnis and then gezelos vechavalos? Why not put everything together? To which the Gemara says, "Atu gezelos vechavalos al dinei mamnis." Rabbi Avo mahin katani. So Rabbi Avo says, you're right. I'll say this is a stylistic approach called mahin. That sometimes the Mishnah will say something, and then the next line will define that more general phrase. So what does the Mishnah mean to say? Mahin dinei mamanis. Say the Mishnah begins by saying, so right, dinei mamanis are adjudicated with a Beis Din of 3. And what constitutes dinei mamanis? Gezelos v'chavalos. Gezelos v'chavalos. So theft and bodily injury are cases of dinei mamanis. Aval hodos v'halvos lo. Rabbi say, now this is where it gets intriguing. What is not included? What is not included in dinei mamanis? Rabbi say the laws of hodos and halvos. So what's this case? If you take a look at Rashi, it's pretty much like right across in Rashi. Hodos v'halvos shnein al iskei malvein. Rabbi say both of these have to do with loans. Hodo shebalodun be'edi hoda shemevi edim shor mefanenu hodalo. So we'll say, listen to this. The case of hoda is witnesses come to Beis Din and they say Silber admitted in our presence that he owes Ruvain $1,000. So they're coming to Beis Din. Now I'm denying it, but they're coming to Beis Din and testifying about this fact. Halvos shebalodun be'edi halva shemeidin befanenu hilvo v'halak kofer b'shtein. We'll say second case is where witnesses show up and they say, we saw Silber go ahead and borrow $1,000 from Ruvain. So we'll say, so the Gemara is suggesting over here that the Mishnah breaks up. The Mishnah says that Dine Mamanis and Gzelos and Chavalos are part of Dine Mamanis, but what's not included in this Mishnah, what's not included in Dine Mamanis is what? Hodaos and Halvaos. Cases, I will say, ultimately, again, where witnesses testify that I admitted that I owe money, or cases where witnesses testify that they saw me borrow money. So I will say, so why isn't this included? Tzricha, di tana Dine Mamanis, because if the Mishnah would have just said Dine Mamanis, Hava Amina, Da'afilu Hodaos v'Halvaos, that I would have thought Dine Mamanis, we'll say by definition, also includes what? And we'll discuss why Hodaos and Halvaos are going to be reckoned separately. But had the Mishnah just said Dine Mamanis and not given any examples of Dine Mamanis, I would have thought Dine Mamanis includes everything, even the cases of Hodaos and Halvaos. Therefore, Tana Gzelos v'Chavalos. Therefore, I will say the Mishnah comes along and explicitly says Gzelos v'Chavalos to tell you that what? To show you when we say Dine Mamanis, we mean things like theft and bodily injury, but not things dealing with loans. Not things dealing with loans. We'll discuss what to do with loans. V'itana Gzelos v'Chavalos, and had the Mishnah just said that Gezelos and Chavalos, cases of theft and bodily injury, are dealt with a basin by three. But the Mishnah did not mention Dine Mamanis, Hava Amino, Hu Adin Da'afilu Hodaos v'Halvaos. I would have assumed that Hodaos v'Halvaos are included in Chavalos. And why is it that ultimately, again, the Mishnah specifies Gezelos and Chavalos? Mishum de Iker Gimel Dichsivi B'Gezelos v'Chavalos Ksivi. Because Rabbi says we're going to see in just a moment. So the concepts of a Beis Din being comprised of three judges, that concept is at first initially shared with us in the context of Gezelos and Chavalos, meaning where we learn out that a basic Beis Din is comprised of three. That concept is learned out by Gezelos v'Chavalos. Where do we see that? Gezelos Dichsiv V'nikra Balabayis Ela Elokim. And I will say ultimately again by Gezelos it says in the case of theft, the pasuk says, and the Balabayis will come close to Elokim. And I will say Elohim. In this case, Elohim is not a reference to the Ribono Shel Olam, but rather a reference to the judge. So the Gemara says Chavalos Mali Chaval B'Gufo Mali Chaval B'Hamon. And also when it comes to the cases of injury, what does it make a difference at the end of the day if somebody injures you in your body or somebody injures you in your money? Either way, again, Abba said those two concepts are linked together. So the idea the Gemara says over here is that the Iker concept, ultimately, again, of a Beis Din of three, is learned out by Gezelos v'Chavalos. Therefore, Tana, ma hein Dine Mamanis, Gezelos v'Chavalos, aval Hodaos v'Halvaos lo. So we'll say, ultimately, again, says the Gemara, therefore, and again, here's our bottom line with this for now. Therefore, the way the Mishnah reads Abba is the following. The Mishnah opens up with a statement, Dine Mamanis b'Shlosha. Monetary law is adjudicated by a Beis Din of three. And what is an example of monetary law, or what type of monetary law are we referring to? Gzelos v'Chavalos, theft and bodily injury. The Rebbe say, what does it not refer to? It doesn't refer to Hodaos and Halvaos. Nothing, so meaning our Mishnah is not referring to loans, either in cases where witnesses show up and say that I admitted I owed money, or witnesses show up and they say that they saw me borrow money. That is not covered by this Mishnah. Okay. Ulamai. So what does that mean when you tell me that Hodaos and Halvaos are not included in this Mishnah? What's the ramification of that? If you're going to tell me that about cases of Hodaos and Halvaos are adjudicated by that don't require three, don't require a Beis Din of three, that's not true. Rabbi Avo said that if you have two people who adjudicated any monetary case, l'divrei hakol ein dinehem din. Everyone will agree that what? That it will say their psak din is not a binding psak din. Ela delo ba'inon mumchim. Rather, I will say what it means is that what? Mumchim. Now this is quite intriguing. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. It's 2, 4, 6, 8 lines in the wide line towards the bottom. Mumchim, smuchim. The nutlu rishus minasi ladon kidamrin come on, so we'll say, as we're going to see the following, there are different types of batei din. Sometimes a Beis Din was comprised of smuchim. Smuchim means that the dayanim had smicha. So let's remember again, The smicha that the Gemara refers to is different than the smicha that we have today. The smicha that we have today is much more of a zecher. It's much more like a remembrance to what smicha once was. Smicha was an unbroken chain of Masorah from Moshe Rabbeinu directly to the person ultimately again who was given smicha. So one of the interesting discussions we're going to have is, do the members of a Beis Din have to have smicha or not? And of course the answer to that question is going to be, it depends, right? It's going to depend, right? It's always the safe answer, right? It depends. It's going to depend really on the nature of the case being adjudicated. So the Gemara says over here, you're telling me now the Mishnah comes to exclude cases of hoda'os and alvos. Exclusive from what? Can't be exclusive from a Beis Din of 3, because every monetary case requires a Beis Din of 3. Rather, that's what? It requires that you don't require mumchin. That by hodas and avos on both sides, you don't need mumkin, you don't need experts. And Rashi defines experts over here as people having smicha. My kasavar. So I will say, so it says, I don't understand. So what do you hold? Ikasavar, erev parshios kasav kan, riboy nami mumchin. Ikasavar in erev parshios kasav kan, shlosha lamri. So we'll say, listen to this. So halacha l'maisa, what the Gemara says over here is the following ideas. There's this yisod of erev parshios. If you remember again, we learned this for the first time in Baba Kama. I will say, many of the psukim that we learn out, much of Dinei Mamanis from, have to do with the various shomrim, the various different custodians we have, which we'll get into a little bit as well. But if you remember again from our Baba Kama days, the psukim are very much written in a, I'm not going to call it like, in a mixed up order. In other words, it doesn't flow from subject to subject to subject. It's what's called erev parshios. Erev parshios means the Torah by design mixed a lot of halachos together in order to teach you what? That what applies in one scenario should apply in a different scenario as well. To which the Gemara says, at the end of the day, if you hold an erev parshios, if you hold it, we'll say that when it comes to monetary law, all the different concepts are mixed together and written together. That means that all of the halachos that apply to one should what? Should apply to the other scenarios as well. Therefore, if you hold erev parshios, I will say, the same way that you need mumchin, let's say for dinei mamanis, you should also require mumchin for what? For hoda'os and halvaos as well. To which the Gemara says, and if you don't, I'm sorry, ikas and the ikas are in erev parshios, and I will say if you hold this erev parshios, then the same way that you require a Beis Din of 3 hoda'os and halvaos, you should also require mumchin. And if you don't hold erev parshios, then the same way that you shouldn't require mumchin, you also shouldn't require what? You shouldn't require Beis Din of 3. The olam kasar erev parshios kasav kan. In reality, all the parashos are written together, and therefore we really should learn out. And I will say, at the end of the day, you really should require mumchin. In other words, I will say what the Gemara is holding right now is the following, and these are very important yisodos. So where the Gemara is holding right now is an halacha l'maisa. Again, we hold the erev parashos, which means pretty much the major sections of monetary law, like in Parashas Mishpatim, are all written a little bit mixed up together by design in order to teach you that you should extrapolate and learn from one to the other. If that's the case, that's why, again, even by Hodas and Alvos, you're going to require ultimately, again, 3 dayanim. But if that's the case, that there's erev parshios, so shouldn't you require mumchin as well? So listen, I'm going to leave you on that cliffhanger. We're going to stop with this about mumchin because I just want to share with you. So again, just so you know, we're ending off. We have to answer the question now. Shouldn't you need mumchin by hoda'os v'halvos? So we'll say we will answer that question in Mirza Hashem first thing tomorrow morning. But I just want to close out the shir. I know, I apologize. I'm leaving out. I see like you're wanting more. Okay, so we'll pick up with this tomorrow, Mirza Hashem, but I'll share with you just a beautiful insight into the Gemara. So we'll say, so actually, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, he asks on the Mishnah. He says, so again, so just so you know, we're picking up in Mirza Hashem tomorrow morning, V'hai delo ba'inan mumchin, 3 lines up from the bottom. So the Rebbe asked an interesting question. The Mishnah learned out the concept of Eidah, learned out the concept that a Beis Din of 23 is made up of 23 because there's Eidah twice. Eidah Matalas, Eidah Mechayelas. So the Rebbe asks, listen to this question. He says, V'chilo matzu chazal l'din zeh limud no'eh yoser elam imraglim. So Chazal couldn't find a nicer source for this halacha than the Meraglim. In other words, really, like we learn out that a Beis Din is made up of 20 because we learn out that Eidah is 10 based on me. There's no other place in the Torah that we can learn out that Eidah means 10. We have to learn from the Meraglim. Listen to how beautiful this is. V'yishlomar Chazal amru meraglim ein lem chelik leolam haba. So Chazal say that the meraglim don't have a portion in the world to come. Va'kasav omer chashav machshavos levilti yidach mimenu nidach. Nishmos Yisraeli ech shalem sheyavdu li'ol me'ad ki hema chelek elokam imao. So the Rebbe says something amazing. On one hand, we have a statement of Chazal that says that the meraglim have no chelek leolam haba. They have no chelek leolam haba. But here's the problem: that we have a pasuk, right? The pasuk says that chashav machshavos levilti yidach mimenu nidach. That a neshama, a Jewish neshama, can never be lost. There's no such thing as a Jew, right? Kol Yisrael yesh lem chelek leolam haba. Every Jew has a portion of the world to come. So what's the pshat? So how could it be that the Gemara says, on one hand, because of what the meraglim did, they don't have a chelik in olam haba, but yet the pasuk says that every single Jew has a chelik in olam haba. So watch this. Lachein matzu lahem chazal takana. Therefore, Chazal found a way to redeem the meraglim. How did Chazal find a way to redeem it? Get ready for this. Lamdu mehem. How did Chazal redeem the meraglim? By making the meraglim the source for learning out the concept that Eda means 10. Al yidei limud zeh yisalu v'yituknu nishmosehem. I will say through this limud, Chazal were able to redeem the neshamas of the limud is going to get better because we're going to see, by the way, that the place from where we learn out the concept of a minion. Learn it out from? We learn it out from Gzeira Shava between the meraglim and Korach. Oy vavoy. What a Gzeira Shava, right? What a Gzeira Shava of Korach and the meraglim. Elamai says that is something so beautiful that Chazal had a desperate desire to go ahead and redeem these Ovrei Avera. How do you redeem these people who divested themselves of all of their Kedusha as a result of their negative activities? By going ahead and using them as the proof text, as the source, ultimately again to learn out beautiful, eternal, everlasting halacha. But to take this one step further with this, I'll stop. Rabbi Yitzchak Berdichev brings down, he says, quotes by Dora Midbar, the Chazal say, the meraglim don't have the chelik olam haba, the meraglim don't have a chelik olam haba. So what does this mean? So Rabbi Yitzchak says so beautifully. He says, what does it mean that the Dor HaMidbar, the meraglim don't have a olam haba? He says that l'maisa, what it means is the following. It says olam haba is when the Jew is able to go ahead and see HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo ba'atzmo, to see God and to understand God in totality. He says that the meraglim and the Dor HaMidbar had such a close connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they didn't have to wait till Olam Haba in order to be able to perceive and to experience God. That's what it means, Dor HaMidbar, Ein Lehem Chelik L'Olam Haba. They didn't have to wait to get to the world to come to experience HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that pure, unadulterated way. And I will say, what's the take-home message of Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Yitzchak? It's Avas Yisrael. Avas Yisrael means you do anything and everything to find something redeeming in another individual. It doesn't matter what you have to do. You can even make stuff up if you need to. You know, the Balatanya brings down, this I'm really going to stop. The Balatanya brings down, he quotes on the Mishnah on Pirkei Avos. He says, Hedemi Talmidav Sha'aron, be of the disciples of Aaron. Oives habrios. Love people. So Bria is the most generic statement you can have about people. Like Bria just means something that's alive. And the Baal Tanya says something so beautiful. She says you have to find the good in every single Jew. And even if the only good thing you could say, well, at least he walks on 2 feet. Like at least he doesn't walk on all fours. If that's the only positive thing that you could say, then find a way to say it. If Rabbi Nachman ultimately again could find the good in the Dor HaMidbar, in the meraglim, even Chazal have to try to find a way. How do we redeem the meraglim? If Rabbi Levi Yitzchak is able to find the good ultimately in the Dor HaMidbar, then Abasa, we understand how much we have to work to find the good in one another. And especially on these days, the Leila Mitzarim, where we lost so much because of Siras Chinam. In this chus, ultimately again, at the beginning of Sanhedrin, in this chus, ultimately again of learning Eida, we had a great chus this morning. We didn't just do a black Gemara, we redeemed the meraglim. What a day! It's not even 6:45, and we already redeemed past generation. It's gonna be a great day. We redeemed the meraglim just simply through our limud. To redeem one another, to redeem ourselves by always being down the kaf chus and always being able to see the good and the beauty in the other. Oh, yeah.